It's time for Swim with Jim. This is Jim Ludwig from Main Street Financial Planning, and you're swimming with Jim today. We're really excited because it's time for spring cleaning, and actually spring cleaning can happen anytime, as you know. Excited to have with us a colleague who's a financial planner near Chicago, Illinois. Cheryl Krueger, good morning. Are you there?
I am here. Good morning, Jim.
We're glad to have you with us this morning. You're one of our favorite people, and we've got some questions for you today. So let's get into it. When financial planners use the term spring cleaning, what issues do you want to invoke in people's minds as to kind of what that entails?
Well, just the same way as spring cleaning, you do it in your home, you think about clutter, and that's kind of what we're thinking about when we think about spring cleaning for financial issues. And so really the main word is declutter and get rid of old stuff. Make sure that what you continue to keep is what you need, and make sure finally that what's most important is easy to find. So if you're spring cleaning in your house, you're trying to do all those things, same thing with your finances. And one thing that makes it more complicated with our finances is it's not only the stuff we see, but it's our digital stuff. And so thanks to technology, we have very small bits and bytes that we have hanging around, and you can find them all over the place. And so the idea is to not only have our spring cleaning done for our physical receipts, papers, things like that, but also our digital stuff, which is bigger and bigger every year. So when I go through with spring cleaning, it's really the same thing. Like I said, getting rid of old stuff, making sure you need what you're keeping, and make sure that what's most important is easy to find.
Well, how often do you recommend clients review their investments, their estate plans, their insurance policies, their spending and saving habits? How often should they do those things?
Well, kind of like with anything else, the main thing is to make sure you do it when there's a change in circumstances. So marriage, kids, divorce, loss of job, kids going off to college. Those are all really good times to make sure that you have checked in on those things. But for some of those specific items you mentioned, let me kind of go into a little more detail. So I'm going to start with spending and savings habits, because most of us are spending all the time. And it really depends, I think, on where people are in their financial life cycle. So if you're tight on a budget, whatever reason there is that you're tight on budget, then really it's something that you need to revisit very frequently. Tracking your spending might be an ongoing exercise. But if you're somebody who is comfortable with where they're at, maybe once a year, just make sure if you're still saving towards big goals like retirement, make sure that every year you review to make sure that you're on track with that savings. And make sure if you're retired and you're spending on your portfolio, make sure that you're checking in on that every year to make sure that what you're spending is still in line with what you're able to spend based on your financial plan. So spending and saving is a big one, and it can really vary from weekly if you feel like you're pretty tight on your budget to annually if you're pretty comfortable. But if you let it go beyond a year or so, you might get into a situation where you're not saving as much as you hope to save, or maybe you're spending down your portfolio faster than you wanted to spend it. So I do recommend that people check in on it at least annually. And then the other thing that looking at budgeting and spending is just, along with spring cleaning, look for things that you're paying for, and particularly services you don't use anymore. The auto bill is becoming something that everybody is using to try to get you to keep up with the services they're offering you and stay regular. And that momentum of just having the bill come out of your paycheck every month, in the same way it helps us with saving without recognizing it, it helps with spending without necessarily keeping on top of it. So as you're looking through that budget once a year, just go through and declutter. Make sure that those services that you're getting billed for are something that you're still using. And what we usually think of is gym memberships. Those have been doing monthly bill for a long time. That was always the big example, but so many services now are auto billed that we sometimes lose track of those. So cable and entertainment channels, software, apps, games, all that kind of stuff. And if you're billed on an annual as opposed to a monthly basis, just make sure you put something on your calendar to remind you to disconnect that service if you're no longer using it when those renewal dates come up. Or if you can disconnect it now if it's something you don't use. So that's the big one on the spending side, and that's something that people should be probably looking through the most frequently of all the things you mentioned. Investments is the next big one, I think, although I don't recommend that people watch their investments every day. At least annual, make sure that you've checked in to make sure that your asset allocation is where you need it to be. That's the allocation between what percentage stocks and bonds you have. Do you have enough cash if you're spending down the portfolio? Do you have a certain cash target you need to be at? So just check in every year and make sure that those things are where they need to be. If you need to do some maneuvering in the portfolios, do that once a year. And then if you have securities that are maturing, like a CD or a bond, and you're going to have a pile of cash that you need to reinvest or do something with, again, just make sure that that's on your calendar so that you are ready to take action when it's time to do that during the year. So on investments, I don't know, Jim, if you had anything else on investments that you're thinking about, but just for spring cleaning purposes, I'd say at least once a year.
I think that's fine. How about insurance?
Okay, so insurance, yeah, you have all kinds of insurance that could be. So one thing is your property casualty insurance, and that means your home and auto umbrella insurance. Those I would recommend you look at least once a year. Make sure that you still have the right limits in place. Make sure that you are getting a competitive price. The insurers for home and auto, obviously it's an annual renewal for you, so you have the opportunity to look at a new insurer and see if you can get a better price. And so I recommend that people look at those at least once a year. And then other kinds of insurance would be things like life insurance. Now those typically are a little longer term commitment, and it's really just checking to make sure that you still have the right amount and that you have the right beneficiaries in place and that those have not changed. And then disability insurance, when your income changes, you need to check in on long-term disability insurance and make sure you still have the right amount of coverage. And then if your income is going up gradually, make sure that your disability insurance, if you're getting it on your own, or even if your employer allows you to opt into things, and make sure you're checking in, making sure that that's keeping up with your income. And then finally, if you have an annuity policy that has some kind of a benefit on it that is triggered like at the end of 10 years or something like that, just make sure you check in on that benefit and make sure that that 10 years is marked on your calendar if it is something that's going to cause you to take some kind of an action or consider some kind of an action.
Great. Well, listen, people end up with a lot of statements and forms and other documents, like their tax returns. How long should people keep things, and where should they keep them?
Oh man, so that's again, we're getting into like the paper versus the digital. I like to have everything in one place. So even if I have paper, I like to have it scanned and have it kept on my computer. It's so easy to file things by calendar year or by type of item, and it's so easy to search them. So, and it's also easier to keep them because you're not having to provide a big storage area for them. So that's my first recommendation, is that you get everything moved over to electronic as soon as you can. So your bank statements, things like that, typically keep, if you have a year-end summary, and I would recommend that all those financial related items you keep at least 3 years, and if they're tax related, keep them 7 years. So if you have taken, for example, deductions for donations that you've made, or your tax statement from your real estate taxes that you've taken a deduction for, keep those things for 7 years and just keep those filed based on them being a tax item, and make sure that you have those available if you would be getting audited from a tax perspective. Investment accounts, keep an annual statement, year-end statement for those, like for 3 years, or again longer if it's tax related. And then any transactions on those taxable accounts, you might need to keep those for longer. So if you have purchased stocks where you need to track the cost basis, you want to make sure that you have all of that documentation, particularly going back before the custodians had to track that. So now the custodians are required to track all of your cost basis information on purchases that you've made since 2011 and 2012. But particularly for purchases that go back beyond that, it's good to have a record of it. And then even if you do have purchases since 2011, 2012, it's good to have a record of those anyway, just in case there's an error in what the custodian is reporting. And then you can check when you transfer from one, if you would happen to transfer from one custodian to another, just check to make sure that information got transferred correctly. Another form that we don't often think about but is important is some of those warranties that we get with products. So if you buy something that has like a 1 year or a 2 year warranty, it's important to keep those until the warranties expire. And again, it's just good to keep those to have something trigger you to make sure that you're aware that the warranty is expiring, so that if you do need to take action, you are reminded that that warranty is coming up. And I'll just use a personal example. I had a laptop PC that I just happened to have the extended warranty on, and about a month before that warranty expired, it was starting to just glitch a little bit. It was just a little annoying. But I sent it to the manufacturer, and they completely did the motherboard and all that. And you know that's an expensive item to replace in a laptop. So just by knowing that that warranty was coming up, I didn't just ignore that little annoyance. I actually sent the computer in and got that big piece of hardware.
And I might remind our listeners that some credit cards exceed your warranties. Recently, I got a new credit card, and I read this, and it doubled the warranties 3 years on products. Many of them have a 1 year warranty, will automatically double it to 2 if you use the credit card. So that's just a reminder.
Absolutely.
Print.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we kind of forget about them because they are, you know, we're not used to tracking things to that level of detail. But it's really good to know what those warranties are, because it can save you some money by getting products replaced if they wear out before they're supposed to. Let's see, I'm trying to think if have I missed some documents, or do you have other things to add to that, Jim?
No, I think that's a good list of what you should keep and where you should keep it, because digital is the way things are going. A few people still object to that, but I think that since business is keeping everything digitally this time, that the consumer has to get with that kind of a program. You know, these days, speaking of digital, these days people have a lot of usernames and passwords in their digital lives. So how do you recommend they keep track and they update and they back up? And ultimately, do they have an exit strategy, which means that they're either incapacitated or have passed on, and what's going to happen to their digital lives?
Yeah, that's really important to think about. I know, depending on how comfortable you are with keeping your passwords, there are those little, if you like the paper tracking of your passwords, there are those little password notebooks that you can get. Now, you don't have to buy them, but it's nice because it says password notebook, so if something did happen to you, people would know that that was your password notebook. But having things in one place is, again, really important. Along with your spring cleaning, you can go through your password list and make sure that the passwords that are there are still up to date, and that you have gotten rid of passwords on your list that you're no longer using accounts for. So again, it's, you know, getting rid of stuff that you don't use anymore that no longer serves you. Also, going through that list might remind you of something that you can get rid of as well, and to help with that decluttering. So paper is fine, just make sure it's all in one place. I don't recommend the individual Post-it note method, because those things can get lost, can be misinterpreted, you don't know when they're out of date or anything like that. So Post-it notes are really convenient, and that's why we all love them. But having that as our password backup system isn't really very useful for someone coming along who's trying to figure things out. And then other ways, so that's the paper approach, which is, again, perfectly fine. Remember to write down also any, besides your passwords, it's also your, those identifying things like those trigger words, words that you need to use to get into your password hints, or your mother's maiden name, or those types of things that people might not necessarily know. Especially like some of those questions are really obscure, like what's your favorite animal? So who's going to know that, right? So write those things down. Maybe you need to remember what your favorite animal is. My favorite color changes about every day. So write those things down as well, so that if somebody needed to use them, they'd be able to access them. Then on the other extreme is if people are really comfortable with digital and like to have things a little bit more integrated with what they're using electronically. The digital password systems, the password managers, things like RoboForm, the Dashlane, LastPass. There are several password managers that are electronic, that do keep everything in one place. And the other nice thing about those is that with some of them, you have the ability to share your passwords with somebody. So if you are sharing them with your spouse, or sharing them with your child, if you're getting to the point where your kids are helping you out with your financial things, it's real easy to keep a second person up to date with where your passwords are. Some of those have security features that are nice, like a reminder to reset passwords regularly. So if you have a password that's sensitive, like your bank account, and you want to be reminded to change it every 3 months, you can have that automatically done through your password manager. And if you don't have that reminder, just remember, if you're doing paper, part of spring cleaning can be to change some of your bank passwords to keep things a little more secure. So I like the digital method, and you can assign categories to things, so it's easy for somebody to find the most important passwords. And also, when if you think about what is my digital, some of those automatic payment accounts, if somebody wanted to be able to change those quickly, if they're able to understand what your most where they're getting charged money to cut those things off, and where they can find those passwords. That's really important. So again, digital or paper, make sure you're assigning categories so people know where the most important stuff is. And then the less important stuff you can still keep, but keep it with a different with a different priority. Then at any age, or whatever method you use, make sure people know where to find your password manager. So again, part of our decluttering and cleaning is making sure we can find the most important stuff. So make sure somebody knows where your passwords are kept. And even if you say, my passwords are a mess, they're on Post-it notes, which Cheryl said not to do, but they are all on pink Post-it notes, and they're in my right-hand desk drawer if you ever need them. That's where they are, just as long as somebody knows where those things are. Make sure somebody can get into those to access your digital accounts and to unlock your digital legacy. So I have now if you think about a password manager, I am the only person that has the login to my password manager. Nobody else has that. And then having a small business, I have some other things that no one else has the password to. And if you think about your iPhone, your iPad, some of your your Kindle, those types of things where there's a password as well, you're going to want to store those, and even your electronic manager might not get to all of those. So what I've done for me is I've created a little important passwords sheet, and Jim, I'll share this with you so you can share it with the people watching this. But it's just a one-page thing, and it says important passwords, Cheryl, and then it says Max knows where to find the paper file with updated passwords. So on my computer, if somebody's looking for passwords, whether they're being devious or they're trying to find things, if they search for the word passwords, they're going to come up with this document that's called important passwords, Cheryl. And there's not any passwords written on this document because it is on my computer. But it does say Max knows where to find the paper file with the updated passwords. So they'll know, go to Max, because Max is the one who is in charge of knowing where this stuff is. And then what I do is that's just like a template. And then I print that out every quarter and update it, make sure that there is a list of updated passwords. So it's things like my password security, what's my current password to access my password vault. It's how do you get into my work computer? How do you get into my home computer? How do you get into my iPhone? How do you get into my Kindle? And then there's a couple of work-related things with QuickBooks and my payroll. So some of those things that somebody's going to really need to access quickly, I've got those written down, and they're kept in a secret location in my home that only my son knows where it is. So make sure that, again, when you think about that digital legacy and getting people into your stuff if something happened to you, just make sure they kind of know the path to get in there. And you can run a fire drill, run a password drill, like, just call and say, hey, I need you to find my passwords, go find them, and have that person go find them and make sure everything's still in place. You can do that kind of things as well. But I think it's really important, as much as we're relying on the security that we're getting with the internet, that we also need to think about what if somebody had to access those things and we weren't available to help them. And so I'm glad you brought that up, Jim. I think that's really important and can be a big part of your spring cleaning.
And thank you for that, because that is great advice and a reminder to all of us to have a fire drill maybe every spring to make sure our backup person can get to it. I have a son too who's a CPA, and he's my backup, and I've never done the fire drill, so I'm going to do that. Listen, our time is just up, but I wanted to say thank you again for expert and to-the-mark advice. Cheryl Krueger, certified financial planner near Chicago, Illinois. I'll put her contact information and that sheet on digital password protection in the comment section so people can find that, or a link to that so people can get that or find Cheryl. Anyway, Cheryl, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. It's been a pleasure.
And you've been swimming with Jim. We'll see you in our next episode in just a couple of weeks. Goodbye, everyone.